Hi guys, I'm David. Thanks for checking out my presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the genogram that I put together for the class and some of the takeaways from that. So let's look. So here is my genogram. Hope you can see it okay. It's a little smaller here from the presentation side, but a lot of circles and squares on here, as you can see. And what was interesting about this experience is that I didn't necessarily learn anything new in and of itself necessarily, but the format and seeing everything laid out this way gave me a different perspective on things. And I think that's kind of the point. And I'm sure many of you had a similar experience with your own genograms. So it's interesting to look at some of the connections and some of the different things going on. And of course, I didn't even really scratch the surface in terms of what all I could put on here. But there's enough here to really think about and dig your teeth into. So I had several different trends and some points of pride and shame that we'll talk about here. I won't cover everything in this presentation. You can see the legend that I use. Those are just some of the things that I used, and as we know, we could have used a lot more. One trend that's interesting is the early deaths or deaths at a young age. And that's kind of a sad trend, but it's prevalent in my genogram, my family tree here. And it started back with my mother's family. So here's my mother, Barbara, and she's part of that trend. And I consider a death at a young age at anyone under say 55. I think that's relatively young. And so we have a lot of that. My mother fits into that. She died of leukemia in 1994 at the age of 53. So certainly she fits that death at a young age definition as I've created it. And her brother, my uncle Tom here, died at age 52, so both pretty young. But in that family, and you can see there were 8 siblings here, all sons and daughters of Harrison and Thelma Lentz. But I don't know how well you can see the ages here of these 3. But we have Stanley at age 19. I can't see too well myself. 19, Richard at 20, and Jack at 22. Really young by anyone's definition. Um, and these were all 3 very healthy young men, seemingly, and just basically dropped dead of massive heart attacks. So that was alarming. So very young. We had other deaths at a young age, as I consider it. The next one here I'll mention is Jim Browning, and this is my wife Lisa, and these are her parents, Jim and Rose, and Jim died at age 51 or 52 of a stroke, just a sudden stroke, and he died 6 months after my mother did actually. Um, and then another one that really hit us all hard was this was my brother Mike and his wife Ann, and she died in 2017 at the age of 52. Had a lot of health problems, mainly related to environmental allergies, actually. And I think that one hit harder because, my wife and I and our family were close to Mike and Ann and their family, and we were close in age. So that was a tough one, of course. But not this is not a point of pride or shame, obviously, just a trend that's interesting to note. Um, we also have the occurrence of mental illness in some different individuals here, and I want to present the mental illness in our family as a source of shame and pride, really, and I'll explain why. You see, first I'll talk about my mother, who had some different issues, mainly some trauma, past trauma associated with her parents here, and as you might be able to tell, they were both abusers of alcohol, and that really impacted the family and the household. And my mother told of often having to do without a lot of things, and the siblings kind of fit in for themselves because of the dependence on alcohol. both her parents. So that contributed to her mental illness. Her long-term battle with leukemia didn't help anything either. But we never talked about it. It wasn't really addressed, and that's kind of the source of shame, I guess, in regards to mental illness, and the fact that we didn't really recognize it or acknowledge it or try to address it and get help. And I think a lot of that is kind of a sign of the times, really, even though, we grew up in the 70s and 80s, and it, it just wasn't dealt with like it is now. Moving forward, my sister-in-law, Brandy, here, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder several years ago. And we're much more open around the time of her diagnosis. We became much more open to discuss it openly and help her get help. So we're progressing. And then two others here. I'll mention briefly my sons, Conrad and Henry, both um, suffer from issues associated with anxiety and depression. And we're very open about discussing that. They're not as far along in recovery or getting better as I'd like, but still, the pride comes in the fact that we have progressed as a family. I think kind of mirroring societal evolution in regards to mental illness as well. It's more accepted. It's less of a taboo subject, and we talk about it more openly. And I'm proud of that, and I'm glad that we do that. Another source of pride that I'll point out, if you notice from the legend here, the red squares, um, that designates veteran status, the individuals that have served in the military. And as you can see, that goes back to my grandfather Otis here, who also, actually, I missed him. He died at a fairly young age as well. Um, but Otis served in World War One. Proudly, he was a supply clerk stateside during World War One, but served proudly. He and Wilma actually then settled in Clay County, Clay City, if anyone knows where that's at, small town. And he was a carpenter. Um, but he was the first in the line to serve in the military. Wilma and Otis, my grandparents, had two sons, Fred, the older, and Rex, my father, each served in the military as well. And then we get down to me here, and just realized that I don't have a connecting line for me and my brother Mike, just kind of floating there, just appeared, I guess. But no, we're supposed to be connected to that. So my sibling Mike's oldest, I'm middle, and then Steve, we each served as well. I was served in the Army. My brother Mike retired from the Navy, and my brother Steve is actually still active duty. He's an optometrist in the Army, currently stationed in Germany. And then over here on my mom's side, my uncle Charlie, he was a Vietnam veteran. So you can see we're well represented in terms of veterans. And, we weren't a more traditional veteran or military family in that there's sometimes kind of almost an obligation to serve. It just kind of happened for each of us. Uh, and it doesn't take away from any of the pride I think we each share in having served, but it just developed into the best course for each of us for different reasons. But again, very, very, very proud of that service. Um, Other trends, and one other thing I did want to point out, you can see, I won't go into a lot of detail, a few relationships where there's discord. Myself and my younger brother, um, not always the best for a variety of reasons. My dad and his brother, there was tension there. My mom, Barbara, and her sister, Bonita, there's a lot of tension there for a variety of reasons. I just wanted to denote that. But another just interesting point for me, at least, that I wanted to point out was a low divorce rate among a group this size. There's only two divorces in this, and then granted, I didn't uh, put all the spouses up here for all. My mom didn't have enough room for all those people, but very very few divorces up there too. Kind of a sign of generational implication there, but still just two here, which is interesting. I might expect to see more from a group this size. Um, but again, it was interesting putting this together. I learned a lot through the process. I found it to be an enjoyable process as well. And I'm glad I gained some expertise in doing this. And I could see where this would be a help in understanding clients and doing a genogram, and then a source of help for them understanding themselves as well. So good experience. So if you have questions or comments about any of this, feel free to get with me on that. Thanks.